desert sun has set, but the heat has not left the sand. A Roman general kneels in the dirt, his wrists bound with rope, his once immaculate toga now stained dark with blood and dust. Around him, a circle of Parthian horsemen watch in silence, their bows lowered, their faces unreadable. He knows what is coming. He has heard the rumors whispered through the retreating columns for days, that the Parthian commander has sworn to give him exactly what he always wanted. A soldier steps forward carrying a small iron cauldron, smoke curling from its lip. Inside, molten gold glows like a dying sun. The general's mouth is forced open, and as the burning metal is poured down his throat, the last sound he ever makes is not a scream, but a wet, gurgling silence. Somewhere behind him, in the smoke of the dying campfires, the screams of the last surviving legionaries were being silenced one by one. This was Marcus Licinius Crassus, the richest man in the history of the Roman Republic. And this was how Rome's greed finally caught up with it. If you had asked any Roman citizen in the year 54 before Christ who the most powerful man in the world was, they would not have said Julius Caesar. They would not have said Pompey the Great. They would have said Crassus. He owned half of Rome, quite literally. Entire city blocks, aqueducts, silver mines, and a private fire brigade that would only put out your burning house after you sold it to him at a fraction of its worth. He had crushed the slave rebellion of Spartacus and crucified 6,000 men along the Appian Way as a warning to the world. He was a member of the first triumvirate, ruling Rome alongside Caesar and Pompey. But Crassus had one problem that gold could never solve. He had no military glory to match his rivals. Caesar was conquering Gaul. Pompey had defeated pirates and kings across the east. Crassus, for all his wealth, was simply the banker of the three. And so, in his 60s, an age when most Roman senators retired to their villas, Crassus decided he would win himself a war. He set his eyes on Parthia. Parthia was an empire the Romans barely understood, a vast kingdom stretching from Mesopotamia to the edges of India, ruled by mounted warrior kings who had never lost a war to Rome, mostly because Rome had never seriously tried to fight them. There was no formal cause for war, no border dispute, no broken treaty, no attack to avenge. Crassus simply wanted the glory, and more than that, he wanted the treasure. The temples of the east were said to be filled with gold beyond counting, and Crassus intended to march in and take it. The Roman Senate was uneasy. Cicero himself argued against the invasion. As Crassus marched his legions toward the border, a tribune named Attius Capito stood in his path and performed a public curse, invoking the darkest gods of Rome upon his expedition. Crassus walked past him without a word. He had 7 legions, over 40,000 men, and he believed that was all the god he needed. The man who would answer that arrogance was barely 30 years old. His name was Surena, a Parthian nobleman from one of the empire's most powerful families, a general so young that many Roman senators would later refuse to believe such a disaster could have been engineered by a man his age. Surena did not command a mirror of the Roman army. He had no legions, no heavy infantry, no shield walls. He had roughly 10,000 horse archers and a smaller elite corps of cataphracts, heavily armored horsemen wrapped head to hoof in steel scale, riding horses armored just as heavily. It was an army built entirely around one idea: never let the Romans get close enough to use their swords. Crassus was offered 2 paths into Parthian territory. One followed the Euphrates River through friendly Armenian terrain, with water, shade, and terrain that limited cavalry movement. The Armenian king Artavasdes personally urged him to take this route and offered reinforcements. Crassus refused. Instead, he trusted a local Arab chieftain named Ariamnes, a man who had once been useful to Rome and who now offered to guide the legions on a faster route straight across the open desert. Ariamnes was already in Surena's service. He led the Roman army away from the river, away from water, away from any terrain that could shelter infantry from cavalry, and directly onto a flat, shadeless plain perfectly suited for 10,000 horse archers to encircle a marching column. By the time Crassus realized his guide had vanished into the horizon, it was already too late to turn back. The Roman legions formed a hollow square, shields locked outward in every direction, the traditional answer to being surrounded. It should have worked against any conventional enemy. It did not work against the Parthians. Surena's horse archers did not charge the square. They rode in wide circles around it, never coming within reach of a Roman blade, firing arrow after arrow into the packed ranks. The famous composite bows of the East could punch through Roman shields and armor at range, and the horsemen fired backward even while retreating. A maneuver so devastating the Romans had no name for it beyond the fear it inspired. The legionaries raised their shields into a testudo formation, hoping to wait out the volley. But the volley did not stop. Crassus had assumed, like every Roman commander before him, that an army of archers would eventually run out of arrows. Surena had planned for exactly that assumption. Behind his cavalry rode a train of thousands of camels loaded with fresh arrows, resupplying his horsemen continuously throughout the day. The rain of iron never paused. Men who had survived a dozen battles across Gaul and Spain found themselves helpless, unable to see an enemy they could actually strike, unable to advance, unable to retreat, simply standing beneath a sky that never stopped raining metal. The sound alone was said to be unbearable, the constant drumming of arrowheads against bronze and wood, punctuated by the screams of men pinned through the foot to the ground, through the hand to their own shield. Officers who tried to rally a charge found their horses shot out from under them before they had gone 20 paces. There was no glory in it, no honor, no moment for a Roman blade to prove itself, only the slow grinding arithmetic of an army being erased from a distance it could never close. In desperation, Crassus ordered his son, Publius, to lead a detachment of cavalry and light infantry to break the encirclement. Publius charged forward with over 1,000 men, including a contingent of Gallic horsemen he had brought from Caesar's campaigns in the west. The Parthians appeared to retreat before him, drawing him further and further from the main Roman position, until the young officer realized he had been lured into open ground alone. The cataphracts closed in. The horse archers surrounded his final position on a small hill. Publius, wounded and with no hope of rescue, ordered his own shield-bearer to kill him rather than be taken alive. When the fighting ended, the Parthians cut off his head, raised it on the tip of a spear, and rode it directly toward the Roman lines, close enough for every soldier and for Crassus himself to recognize his son's face. The battle continued until nightfall, when the Parthians finally withdrew, not out of mercy, but because horse archers do not fight well in darkness, and their commanders knew the Romans had nowhere left to run. Crassus, shattered by grief and humiliation, ordered a retreat under cover of night toward the town of Carrhae, abandoning thousands of his own wounded on the field, men who begged not to be left behind and were slaughtered or captured at dawn. Of the roughly 40,000 men who had marched into Parthia, more than 20,000 now lay dead, and some 10,000 more would soon be marched off in chains, resettled in the far eastern edges of the Parthian Empire, never to see Rome again. Even Carrhae offered no safety. Surena sent messengers offering a truce and a peaceful conference to negotiate Crassus's withdrawal. Against the advice of his surviving officers, the broken and desperate Crassus agreed to meet him. Whether by design or by the panic of Roman soldiers who suspected a trap, a scuffle broke out during the parley, and in the chaos, Crassus was killed. His head and his right hand were sent to the Parthian king as trophies of the greatest defeat Rome had suffered in generations. And, according to the Roman historian Cassius Dio, writing more than 2 centuries later, the Parthians were not finished with him even in death. Knowing Crassus's reputation as the wealthiest and greediest man Rome had ever produced, they are said to have poured molten gold down his lifeless throat, mocking him with the words, "Sate yourself now with the metal for which you thirsted in life." The disaster at Carrhae did far more than end one general's ambitions. 7 legions worth of eagle standards, the sacred silver emblems that represented the very soul of a Roman legion, were carried off into Parthian temples as trophies, not to be returned for over 3 decades until Augustus achieved through careful diplomacy what Crassus's legions never could through force. When the standards finally came home in 20 BC, Augustus celebrated it as though it were a conquest in its own right, minting coins and commissioning statues to mark the moment Rome had erased, at least symbolically, the shame of Carrhae. It tells you everything about how deep that wound had cut, that the mere return of lost banners without a single sword drawn was treated as one of the great triumphs of his entire reign. But the deeper wound was political. Crassus had been the 3rd leg of the first triumvirate, the wealthy counterweight balancing the ambitions of Caesar and Pompey. With him gone, there was no longer any figure capable of mediating between the 2 remaining giants of Rome. Within 4 years, Caesar crossed the Rubicon, and the Roman Republic tore itself apart in civil war, a war that Crassus's death had made almost inevitable. Historians still study Carrhae as one of the purest demonstrations of a fundamental military truth. Firepower and mobility, used correctly, can defeat raw numbers and heavy armor without ever allowing the stronger force to close the distance. But the deeper lesson has nothing to do with archery or cavalry at all. Crassus did not lose because Rome was weak. Rome was, at that very moment, the most powerful military force on earth. He lost because one man's personal hunger for glory and gold was allowed to override every warning, every omen, every piece of sound advice offered to him by people who understood the terrain and the enemy far better than he did. He walked into a desert he did not understand, following a guide he had not verified, chasing a treasure he did not need, to win a war nobody had asked him to fight. So the next time ambition tempts you to ignore the quiet voice of caution, to silence the advisor who questions your plan, to chase a prize simply because a rival already has one of their own, remember Crassus kneeling in the sand, wrists bound, waiting for a debt that gold alone could never repay. Some victories are not worth their price, and some men only discover that truth when it is far too late to matter. If this dive into one of history's most brutal and least known military disasters gripped you, subscribe for more untold stories from the ancient world, and hit like if you want to see more of Rome's darkest defeats brought to life. Tell us in the comments, have you ever seen ambition blind someone so completely that they walked straight past every warning sign? We will be reading every story. Thank you for watching, and may your ambitions never outrun your wisdom.